Now I know why couture dresses cost thousands of pounds, because if attaching 5 flowers is taking this long, imagine if I had covered the entire skirt. What's up, Katie Vaz, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Priscilla. I'm a Nigerian women's wear designer based in the UK. In this video, I'm going to be making this really cool 3D flower mini A-line skirt. This is the first of a few projects I'm going to be making as the year comes to an end. The idea is to make garments and accessories that I could possibly wear for, all those Christmas, end of year, New Year events. I thought, why not just make it into a series? So if you guys are looking for possible ideas on what you could make and wear to any of these occasions, you have an entire playlist of projects that you could try out. These are going to range from different levels, so some are beginners, some are intermediate, and some of these projects will be a bit more advanced. So if you have an idea of what we should tackle, do leave a comment section down below, because that way we end up creating something that we all want to see, we all want to wear going towards the end of the year. So let's get straight into this project. I'm going to be sharing how to make the pattern, how to stitch it, fitting it on myself, and then the final outcome at the end. So if you're excited like I am, let's get straight into the video. I'm going to start this project by taking my measurements, and the first of many is my waistline. I want the skirt to sit about mid to high rise on my body, so I'm measuring my waistline around that point, and then my hip, because I just kind of want it to be like semi-loose and comfortable to wear. Then I'm going to measure the vertical length from my waist to my hip, as well as the skirt length. Mine is 16 inches, so it's on the mini side, but you can work with whichever length that you are happy with. And I'm going to be using some plain cotton. I only honestly use about 1.5 meters, but I have 3 meters here because I want to use it for a future project. And then I have 0.5 meter of non-static lining, as well as some invisible zip. This one is 14 inches because I just wanted a zip that would be long enough, but you could technically use one that was 10 inches and it would still be enough. I'm going to start the pattern drafting with doing the one for the front. So I'm going to do the front skirt pattern, and here I'm just drawing a vertical line that's going to become my center front line. And then I'm going to come to the top of the line and make a horizontal line that cuts across. This is going to become my waistline. Now from that waistline, I'm going to mark the vertical distance from my waist to my hip, and then mark my desired skirt length afterwards. This point I'm going to square across, which essentially means drawing a horizontal line that goes through the point I just marked, so the hip line as well as the hemline, like I'm doing here. And a skirt pattern is quite straightforward. Once I have these lines marked, I'm not going to go along the different dimensions. I mark my quarter measurement. So on the waistline, I'm going to mark 1/4 of my waist measurement plus 1 inch for the waist start and 0.5 inch for ease. On the hip line, I'm going to mark 1/4 of my hip measurement plus 0.5 inch of ease, and the hemline width is the same as my hip, so it essentially just goes straight from my hip to the hem. You can do yours the same or have it as an A-line. H-line skirts are actually quite pretty as well, even though I said this was going to be an A-line, I decided to just keep it as a H-line, which is essentially when it goes straight from the hip to the hem. I'm going to be connecting the hip line to the waistline using this side of my pattern master, and this is what the basic shape of the skirt pattern is looking like so far. I'm going to go ahead and add the 1 inch waist dart halfway through my waistline, and I'm just going to mark it like this, and then I'm going to be marking the middle point, so that guides me to draw the height of my dart. The height of my dart is about 4.5 inches, so it ends before the hip, so I don't lose any measurements from my hip line. And once I've drawn the tall section of my dart, I'm going to connect it to the sides to make the typical looking triangular shape that waist darts have. After drawing in the dart, I'm going to come to the edge of the side of my waist, and I'm going to raise it by 0.5 inch. This just makes for a more flattering fit along the waistline of the skirt. So I'm going to raise it from the middle of the waistline towards the side, so the shape looks like this. After making all those changes, I'm going ahead to add my grain line to guide me when I'm cutting the skirt onto fabric, as well as a 2 centimeter or 1 inch hem allowance. Then I'm adding a 1 centimeter seam allowance along the waist and along the side. The plan is to cut the front of the skirt on a fold, and I'm going to use the same pattern for the main skirt and the lining. Moving on to the back skirt pattern, which is essentially just it's very similar to the front. There are just a few changes I'm going to make, but I'm going to just trace off certain lines for my back skirt pattern. So I'm going to trace off the side seam, the waistline, the hemline, and then the center back I'm going to change up just a little bit so it sits a lot smoother on the back of my body. I'm just transferring the rest of the dart because that's just as important, ensuring that I extend it all the way to the edge of the waistline, transferring my hemline as well because that's really important. And then I'm going to draw in the grain line and annotations for my back skirt pattern. Now coming on to the waistline of the back, I'm going to be removing 1/2 inch on the very top of the back of my skirt pattern, and this is just like a center back that makes the skirt just lie smooth and follow the natural curve on the back of my body. This I'm going to connect to the rest of the back, which is essentially just straight. It just goes in that 1/2 inch on the top edge, and that is how my back skirt pattern is going to look all done. I'm just adding in annotations, and I'm going to cut out the pattern piece ready to use to cut my fabric. Now I've done this mini skirt pattern, but if you're someone who wants your skirt to be longer, feel free to do so. Please create a skirt and a pattern that you are happy with, you're comfortable wearing. I tend to prefer my skirts to be either just on the knee or above the knee because I'm not very tall, so that works really well for me and for my body. Now using the patterns I just make, I'm going to go ahead and cut my skirt pieces. I'm going to cut the main skirt with the pattern just like its own, and I'm going to use the same pattern to actually cut the lining, and then I'm going to cut out the pieces for the fabric flowers. Alright, quick update. I am done making the patterns and cutting all of the skirt pieces. I have them on the table. The skirt itself is very easy. It's like a simple H-line skirt, so it sits relatively mid to high rise on my waist, and then it's on the mini side. And the way I did the lining, let me just show you how I cut the lining real quick, is I used the same pattern for the lining, but I just folded up the bottom portion so the lining is shorter than the actual skirt. So that was how I cut the lining, and I just used this like non-static fabric for the lining. And then the main skirt I cut like the full length. So this would work because the side seams are straight. If it was a line or if it was a different shape, I would have had to change this up, but because it's straight and it's like an angle here, joining them together would work. The next thing was cutting the the pieces for the 3D flower or the rosettes. So this one is about 3.5 inches wide and 25 inches long. And the cool thing with skirt designs like this is you just need to wear like a plain white blouse or a plain black satin blouse, and the skirt does all the drama for you. But I'm going to go ahead and stitch it up together, fit it on my body. I will say making the flowers is going to be where the work is. The skirt itself, I would say I can easily make in an hour, but those flowers will take me at least 2 days because of the technique that I want to use. But let's get into this project and finish the skirt. It's time to sew the skirt together, and I'm starting off with transferring the waist dart from the pattern onto the skirt pieces. With a pin, I marked the dart point, and I'm going to be marking that exact point that I have done with the pin with a chalk on the wrong side of my fabric. This would allow me to stitch the dart to end at that point that I just marked on both the back and the front pieces. So I'm putting the waistline together, and I ensure that I notched the dart edges along the waistline so I know exactly how much dart I'm stitching away. So I'm going to pin away the dart along the waist and ensure that I have it folded correctly to go through the point that I just marked with a chalk. This I'm going to do on my 2 back pieces, stitch them away, and then I'm going to repeat the same on my front pieces. So I'm going to take this to my machine, and I'm going to be sewing the dart using a normal regular straight stitch, ensuring I do a back stitch at the beginning and at the ends to secure my dart in place. And this is what the front of the skirt is looking like. I'm going to join the front and back pieces together along the side seam. So I'm putting right sides facing each other, and then I'm going to be sewing on a 1 centimeter seam allowance for my main skirt piece. And then I'm going to repeat the same steps for my lining pieces. So sew up the darts, join the side seam, so I have the main outer shell of the skirt already connected together, ready for me to add the fabric flowers on. I honestly think that sewing the flowers is where the work of this skirt design is, because the skirt itself is quite simple and straightforward, but I've ended up cutting 10 pieces to make the fabric flowers or rosettes. You can do as many as you like. This takes a bit of time, but it's totally worth it because it adds the beauty to the skirt. Now, folded the rectangular piece inwards with the right side tucked inside, and I'm sewing up the side seam to create like a tube. This I'm actually going to be turning inside out. If you have one of those tools for turning straps inside out, please use it. It will just save you so much time. And then I'm going to fold in the top and the bottom side. So I have a completely closed off strap piece I'm going to be gathering to make my fabric flowers. There are many different ways to make this detail, but this is the one that came to the top of my head. So I repeated that for all 10 pieces for my fabric flowers. And then the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to be gathering the smooth side that I folded, not the side that I stitched, because pulling those gathers would be a lot easier to do on this side that doesn't have a seam. With my machine, I'm sewing on the longest stitch, and then I'm going to pull the thread to gather it up to make those beautiful details that this shape would have. Once I was done gathering everything together, this is what it looked like, and this I'm essentially just going to repeat for all of the details. This is what really honestly took time, and I wanted to do it right, so all of the flowers were a similar size. After what seemed like forever, I was on gathering all of the pieces, and I just took some time to just ensure that I distributed the gathers as evenly as possible across all of the different pieces. This I'm really going to be very particular about when it's time to stitch the detail onto the skirt, but I just distributed it and then pinned them down. So when it was time for me to place it on the skirt, I just moved things around in a way that looked and made sense to me visually. So I actually played around with this a few times, distributed it, measured the shape, the distance from the different flowers, and ensured that I had enough on the front that went into the back, kept the pieces away from the hem, the waist, and the back edges. But once I was happy with that, I put some pins on the side to mark where I wanted the detail to exactly sit. I didn't want to use chalk, but you can use chalk if you want to. So the pins I put on the sides and on the top. And in terms of sewing this in, I started off from the outer edge, and I was just sewing essentially along the gathered side. And as I was sewing, I was folding the detail in tighter and tighter. And when I got to the middle, I tried to cover up whatever space would be left in the middle of this. I didn't sew 2 layers on top of each other, so the next corresponding layer I will shift slightly away from the edge of the side that I just stitched on earlier on. This took some time, honestly, because you want to sew it in such a way that it looks nice and neat, and you want to repeat the same movement for all the different flowers so they kind of look similar in terms of the width, in terms of how many layers you've stitched together. I've stitched in like 5 rosettes, and I'm really tired. Now I know why couture dresses cost thousands of pounds, because if attaching 5 flowers is taking this long, imagine if I had covered the entire skirt. I don't even want to know, but it's coming together really nicely. I think the only thing I would do differently is not do differently. The only thing I want to add is I'm thinking about getting like a button or a pearl to put at the very middle of the rosettes or the flowers here. I just have to make sure that whatever I get is not very heavy, else it's going to weigh down, make the flower heavy and weigh down the skirt. I'm using cotton, but I say if you want your skirt to hold these details very well, try and use maybe something a bit heavier, maybe like a denim or a duchess satin, something with a little bit more weight, because it will be able to carry like this. It works because there's not a lot of flowers on the skirt, but if I want to add another 5 or 6 maybe to cover up these spaces in between, the skirt to be too heavy, like it will be pulling the material of the skirt too much, the weight. When I have it on my body, you see the flowers start flopping in a way that doesn't look really nice. So use a heavier fabric if you don't want to experience that, or maybe it will even show by the time I wear it, and then maybe I'll add a white or red or black bead or pearl in the middle. Maybe hand stitch it or glue it down, we'll see. But damn, I am tired. But it's looking cute though. It's looking really, really cute. This would be nice. This detail would be nice on the sleeve actually. Okay, let me finish this up. Later that day, I went up to the fabric shops and I found this red button. They look like flowers and they're about 1 inch wide. I got a few of them to sit right in the middle of my flower detail. This I'm hand sewing because of the design of the buttons. I just put some music on, made a cup of tea, and I just enjoyed the process of stitching the buttons in. But you can't really tell from afar, but when you come close, you really see the nice touch that the buttons add to the piece. I'm going to go ahead and join the lining to the skirt, and I'm going to be joining up the side, the waist, and the other side, because that's how I plan to finish up those edges of the skirt. So I'm going to take this to my machine and I'm going to be sewing up the center back edges along the waistline, and I'm going to leave my hemline open because that's how I'm going to turn this skirt inside out. And because of the difference in length from the main skirt to the lining, I have to join the hemline last in a way that it connects seamlessly. And this is what it's looking like so far. You can clearly tell that the lining is shorter than the main skirt, which was intentional. But I'm going to fold the main skirt hemline upwards to meet the hemline of the lining. So there is a fold here that once I'm done stitching and I turn the skirt inside out and I give it a press, the main skirt lining folds a little bit inwards to meet the lining hemline. And I'm going to be sewing this up on a 1 centimeter seam allowance, leaving a little opening that would allow me to turn the skirt inside out, and then that opening I can always hand stitch later on to finish everything nicely. Here's a closer look at what the edge of the skirt looks like, and this I'm going to be folding in like this so that secures the hemline of the main skirt tucked away on the inside of the skirt. I'm going to do this for both edges, and this is the bottom of the center back edge. Now once I was done doing that, I trimmed off the corners along those edges, and I'm going to turn the skirt inside out through that opening that I left. The opening was about 5 inches wide. That's how wide it was. And I'm just going to pull the right side of the skirt through, and this I'm going to take to my iron and I'm going to press everything nice and smooth, pressing the waistline, the center back edges to relax all of the stitching. And the pressing just would give you a better idea of how things are looking like. And this is what the skirt looks like after I was done giving it a good press. I love the fact that the lining just hides away any stitching of the flowers, and that opening that I left I was able to press neatly when I was doing my ironing. And I'm going to be sewing it close using needle and thread. The way I'm going to sew it, I'm going to pick a little bit from the hem of the lining, pull that thread through, and then just pick a little bit through so the thread is not visible on the right side of the skirt. So just that first layer, and then just repeat it on both the lining and the skirt hemline, connecting them together like in a zigzag fashion to completely close off that hole that I left to turn the skirt inside out. Now the final step is to add the zip on the center back edge. I'm going to be attaching an invisible zip just to ensure that that is concealed nicely on the back of the skirt. So I'm going to grab my invisible zip, I'm going to open it up, and I'm going to be pinning it on both sides of my back skirt. in such a way that I'm folding the top edge of the zip along the top edge or the waistline of my skirt. And I'm going to take this to my machine and I'm going to be sewing up both sides of my zip to both sides of the back of the skirt. If you are new on the channel and you're wondering how to stitching an invisible zip onto either a center back or a side seam, I have a dedicated tutorial for this, so I'm going to link it on the screen so you go check it out if you want a video that just shows you how to do this more accurately. If you also have not subscribed at this point, make sure to do so. Give the video a thumbs up if you are enjoying it and you are going to try out this project. But to finish up the skirt, I'm going to be sewing the bottom of the center back edge close. So I'm putting right sides facing each other and I'm just sewing from the hem to the very bottom of the zip, so the very bottom of where my zip connection or joining ends. I'm going to give this a press to finish everything up, and this is what the final skirt looks like. I'm actually happy I didn't make the skirt too tight because it's on the short side, so the fact that it has a little bit of ease in there gives me movement, gives me the room to actually walk, sit, and have a great time wearing the skirt. It came out really nice. I honestly really love how the skirt came out. It's super cute and it sits perfectly at the length that I wanted it to sit. If I had more time, I think I would have definitely added more rosettes, maybe like a smaller sized version, just sprinkled in between those blank spots. But I had an amazing time creating this skirt and I hope you guys enjoyed watching it too. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed. Don't forget to tag me on social media if you do try out the skirt design. And until next time, have a good morning, afternoon and evening wherever you are. Bye.